Welcome to Speak Sex. I am your host, Eurydice. I am still in quarantine, still your sex whisperer out here in the internet universe. And today I'm speaking with an amazing intimacy wellness expert, Susan Bratton. She's joining us from San Francisco, from the Marin County, and she has so much experience that it's going to be an hour full of information. So do not leave. Stay tuned. She's the author of 34 books on sexual wellness of all kinds of ways, interesting, different ways, from relationship magic to dirty talk to getting your physical functionality improved, how to make love, how to orgasm, how to communicate with your partner, how to save your marriage. And she's also the co-founder of Personal Life Media and The 20, which sells the world's first organic blood flow supplement for better lovemaking, and it's called Flow. So she'll tell us all about that as well. Welcome to the show, Susan.
Hi, beautiful Eve. Thanks for having me. We've been wanting to get together for so long, and I was really glad that you were up for wanting to talk about how to smash the patriarchal view of orgasm.
Exactly. Yes.
That is a good subject.
Right. Smashing the patriarchy is my specialty. And, I feel like the most effective way is to do it with our logic and our language, because then it's more inclusive. It's not just saying, I hate men, which, I think you and I agree men are victims of this just as much as women. So the patriarchy is just a word of like the patriarch who was at the beginning of it all and set up rules of extreme control that affect the personal happiness and freedom of all genders, right? So within that, yes, the limitations of women's orgasms. Do you agree that there are 7 different orgasms that women can experience?
Well, I like to say 15. And
I love you.
That's for both men and women.
Okay.
What I was thinking about was how could I convey in a 1-hour show with you the different things that I think go into expanding our view of what our orgasmic potential is, moving from what I'd like to define as what I call the patriarchal view of orgasm. And as I was thinking about it, I think there's a conversation that we need to have about genital anatomy and erectile function. That's an engorgement. There's kind of the physical piece that I think you can't really understand how to see a bigger orgasmic potential until you understand how the body actually functions. So there's that piece. Then the second piece is what you just said, which is this idea of how many kinds of orgasms are there. So I'd like to take a minute to define the types of orgasms. And what I often get asked from people is, what does that feel like? Because it's easy for us to speak them into the world, but also there needs to be a language of kinesthetics, of body-based reality for people so that they understand not just rationally what they're going for, but what they are going for in their body and their feelings. So I think that's a second piece. And then a third piece is, and I'm not sure which one of these comes first, this is very chicken and egg, if you will, but when you're talking about the kinds of orgasms a body can express, can feel, you also need to talk about how orgasm happens and the different types of orgasms from the perspective that it's not just a lead up to climax, having a climax, and then having a refractory period, which is the
which
50-year-old perspective that I want to update for the 21st century.
Right.
So there's that piece of it. And then that always gets into, and this is more than we have time for, but I want to kind of lay the foundations of what it takes to achieve your orgasmic potential. Because I consider myself, I like to call myself an orgasmanaut, like an astronaut that goes out into the far reaches of orgasmic space, of orgasmic possibility.
I love it.
I have taken myself into those places. And what does it take to be comfortable, confident, connected, relaxed enough to achieve those states? Because that's the fourth piece of this. It's not just about the physicality. It's not just about understanding the types of things. It's not just understanding what it feels like in your body, not just understanding the way orgasm really works versus what we've been taught, but also underlying all of that, the firmament upon which your orgasmic expansion lies, the bed in which it lies, is safety and surrender and pleasure and trust and heart connection and all of those pieces. So I don't think any conversation about smashing the patriarchal view of orgasm is complete without each one of those essential components of the conversation.
Yeah. And because it's such a huge topic, I mean, look how long just to introduce it. I feel that, people get a tiny glimpse of it or a little summary and they think that's it, right? So to me, the more interesting aspect is the mental aspect. The opening up your mind to the understanding of it, to what you just said, is a big hack, a big life hack, because we just don't have that concept to begin with of what orgasm is. And then, we have a lot, I think that our generation of feminist women, have felt that, okay, we taught the world about the clit and we got men to be willing to give, pleasure back. That's huge. And we kind of get stuck there. And then everything else, all the other potential ways of feeling that orgasmic freedom and oneness, have stayed at the level of borderline porn, shame, embarrassment, right? So getting all of that out in the open and trying to legitimize it as much as the clitoral orgasm was, in the 60s and 70s, that will be amazing, right?
Yeah, I think that awareness is an instant open door. The minute you become aware that there's 7 or 15 kinds of orgasms, it flings wide the door to possibility. So awareness is one of the biggest pieces of finding your orgasmic potential.
Right.
And the other thing is that I think when we think about the clitoris still, a lot of people are stuck in the tip of the clit, just the little 5% of what they see. And so that's where I want to go to anatomy and really talk very simply about how to swing wide the door of your orgasmic potential by understanding what's actually going on down there. But before I do, I think I'd like to also just say my piece about what I think the male patriarchal view of orgasm is.
Yes,
is that
go
okay?
ahead. Thank you. Yes.
So what it looks like to me is in today's modern age is still I have a hard on. I'm the male. I've got a hard on. So now I want to fuck. Right. And I'm going to throw you down on the bed. And your bra's still going to be on, and I'm going to rip your panties off, and I'm going to spread your legs, and I'm going to maybe spit in my hands on your pussy. And then, is it okay if I say things like that?
Yes, absolutely, and it's so true.
I'm going to spit on your pussy with my spit, and then I'm going to shove my dick in you. I'm going to pump away like a piston, boom, 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 in and out, in and out, in and out, like a piston. Like my cock is completely unconscious of what it's in. It's just in this wet hole that feels good to my dick. And then I'm going to come and I'm going to ask you if you came, and you're going to lie and tell me you did. And then you're going to do that about 100 times because you like to be close to me. And then you're going to stop wanting sex with me because you resent me, because you never get to come and you never get warmed up. And I begin to hate you. And I start to look for someone who's more exciting and interesting to me, who actually has an emotional connection to me, who cares about me. Meanwhile, you've gone along thinking you're great in bed. You've made me come. You like sex with me. It feels really good to me. I come every time. And I'm super glad, and I've got a great sex life. And then all of a sudden, one day, you don't want sex with me, and I think, oh, there's something wrong with you. Right. You're frigid. You must be a lesbian. You're just a bitch who's withholding and rejecting me, and I fucking hate you. Yeah. And so, that was a dramatization.
Yes,
and I want to say that that's not really what I think is actually happening most of the time. Right. But if you look at the movies and you look at porn and you look at the dissatisfaction of most women, and if you're like me, you've talked to thousands upon thousands of married men whose wives don't want to have sex with them anymore and they want to know what to do. I got an email from a guy today who said, how do I get my wife to want me for sex again? Which is one of the most common emails I get. She had some affairs just before she turned 50, and now she's gone through menopause, and she just doesn't want me anymore, even though I've forgiven her for the affairs. And I'm like, oh, dude, this is the classic construct. Like, you are just like all the other guys. And this is what has happened in the past. And what I will say is that, number one, I love men. And I truly do think that the majority of men, and I mean like 99% of men, want to give women incredible pleasure. But what they're doing isn't working, and they've tried, and she's not helping, and they're both lost. And, so how do you turn that story around? I don't want people to hate me because I'm saying that story and thinking, shut up, bitch, you don't even know what you're talking about. That's not how I am. What I'm telling you is that I've been a sexpert for 15 years, and I've gotten thousands of emails from people who I see that story play out over and over and over and over again. Right, so I do know what I'm talking about, and it does happen.
Well, what I found, that's part of, the people that I know, and the people who are my listeners, and the people who come on the show are not that way, of course, So I like to think, I do believe that the majority of the younger generation have a different approach to it because they're taught, a lot of those guys, their moms were feminists or something, or they have heard about date rape, which is a relatively new concept. They have heard that there are consequences, that the word will go out, even, through like Tinder or the dating apps, that this guy, doesn't like respect consent or whatever. So there is and there is also kind of like, as I said in the beginning, a new pride among men that they want to please you. So even if they ask you, did you come? They often, start by eating you out. They first will eat you out and then they'll go in, and they feel so that may replace like the proverbial spit, right? Or they'll be okay with using like lube or coconut water. But coconut oil. But but I feel that yes, what the crux of what you're saying is that for the entirety of patriarchy, which is thousands and thousands of years, our understanding of the sexual initiative belongs to the men, and it belongs to the men with that physical desire expressed by like the hard-on, and the woman is the passive one by means of like having the receptacle, the hole, right? And the woman's expression of sexual desire and of love, which you brought up, the word love, which is very telling and a huge difference, and we mix everything up somehow, is in receiving and in pleasing. So many of the women continue to feel that, by kind of like giving in and having the sexual experience, even if they come, clitorally or even vaginally, even if sometimes they squirt, they feel that this is how they express love and acceptance. And I don't think it's the same for men. Men take way longer to understand, to feel, to feel the same kind of like expansion of love and intimacy that women get into right away. So there is definitely a disconnect. And I think that that's part of the patriarchy disconnect. So even when you talk to like really progressive woke guys, they'll be like, well, women need like 100 hours of talking for like, 2 hours of great sex, and I'll talk to them because I want to get laid, So it's rare, even though it's happening more and more, to find the man who is as open and receptive, intimate in intimacy as the woman. And that's because they're not raised that way. They're raised to not speak, to be macho, to go out and wage war, to take things, to compare each other by means of like either their women or their value, the monetary value. Like historically, women were loot. There was a war, you would take the women, you would rape them, you'd give them to the soldiers as perks, right? So we need to kind of like disconnect from all that ancestral, trauma and social conditioning that has come with it, that separates how women and men respond to sexual desire and sexual exchange. So I think that's what the main thing is about, the main difference is about how the patriarchy has formed us. So whereas women are the powerful sex gender, because we do get more orgasms, we can have them continuously. We can go on and on while men will pass out, right?
No, that's not true. Men can also orgasm like women. I think that's a misnomer. I think that's part
great.
of the patriarchy
That's great.
As well.
That's great. Yeah. That's the patriarchal oppression of men. It's like you're done.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, go ahead. I mean, I would love to hear about all the 15 ways of finding pleasure and how you think each one, what do you think the best way is to go about discovering, opening up, learning, adjusting, not being stuck in the familiar?
Okay, so the first thing that I want to say is let's talk about the 15 kinds of male and female orgasms. To really discuss that, what you have to understand is that the male and female body are actually very, very similar. We just think they're different. We think that women are able to be multi-orgasmic and that men are basically one ejaculatory orgasm and done. And that's one of the things that patriarchal sex has ruined for men, is this notion that ejaculation and orgasm are essentially entwined when actually they're separate systems in the body. The Taoists have been having male multiple orgasms through full body energy orgasms for thousands of years. And most people don't pick up Taoist practices because it also includes semen retention, which means you don't get to ejaculate. You just have orgasms without it. The thing that modern men need to understand is that you can actually use these techniques to choose to have ejaculatory choice. You can come when you want to or when she wants you to, or your partner wants you to, he wants you to, anyone wants you to. You can decide to ejaculate when you want to rather than feeling like you don't have any control over it. And then you can begin to take that sexual energy that you're shooting out the end of your penis and bring it into your body and circulate it and bring the pleasure inside, connect it to your heart, connect it to your brain, connect it to God, connect it to source. And so that's the notion that I think most men need to understand, is that orgasm, and this is the same for women, orgasm isn't that chart you saw from Masters and Johnson that showed, the orgasms can you have? Well, you can have kissing orgasms. You can have getting hickeys and your neck can give you orgasms, your clavicle and sternum, the breast tissue, the nipples, the erectus abdominis of your belly. If you grab that and shake it a little, rock it a little, you can come from that. You can come from stroking the mons, stroking the labia, stroking the clitoris, getting the shaft erect, licking it, sucking it, rubbing it, swiping across it, circles on the opening to the vagina, fingers inside, tongue inside, penis inside, combinations of blended fingers, tongues, there's just so many. And then, of course, anal orgasms, because that perineal sponge sits between the opening, it sits between the rectum and the vaginal canals. So it loves stimulation inside. The anus has tons of nervous tissue that's full of sensation. The perineal area, the spot between the opening to the vagina and the opening to the anus. Never mix the two. I always want to say,
yeah.
You got to keep kosher.
Yes, yeah.
One hand is for the ani, one hand is for the vagina.
Yeah,
Never
sure.
the two shall meet.
Yeah,
Use a nice tight glove with lots of lube. Take the glove off. Wash your hands.
Yes.
E. coli is not your friend.
No.
And I personally don't recommend rimming. I mean, I think it takes a lot of cleanliness. There's a lot of parasite transmission, and E. coli you have to be careful with. It's like something you see on porn. That is not the real world.
Yes.
So
Yes. Absolutely.
everybody's talking about rimming, and I'm just old school. I like to friggin' protect my health. Mm-hmm. So, so you've got all these wonderful things.
But I do have a question. Does it sound the way you describe it like men have to do more work? I mean, I don't think so. But, is there reciprocity in all of this besides the pleasure that we get from pleasing the other?
Well, what I've found with men, and I painted a very negative picture of that patriarchal orgasmic experience earlier in this episode, but in all honesty, most men would give up their own pleasure to give a woman pleasure. And once a man gets some skill in understanding how to be a good lover and how to give pleasure in, he wants to do that for hours. There's nothing that makes most men happier than coming the shit out of their woman for hours.
I agree. No, I agree.
So it's not work
a sense of
for
pride.
guys.
Yeah. I mean,
if it's work, it's that he just hasn't had enough experience. He literally doesn't have enough techniques. Techniques are very important for men to know.
Mm-hmm. And I feel that one of our problems, that started basically with Judeo-Christian, teaching. It starts like early in school. You learn the Bible and you learn about Adam and Eve. And one of our problems is that we are not trained to use our mind while we're having sex. We feel like that's when the mind goes to sleep, right? We're not thinking and we're just kind of going into some animal nature and we're not speaking and we're moaning. So thinking about what you're saying, being aware in some basic, consciousness of the anatomy, of the perks, of what might work next, of the mechanics of it, staying, conscious mentally and thinking and not just kind of letting go because you feel that this is the unspeakable, what happens in the dark, we're just going to do what animals do and then we'll go back to our normal life, right? But normalizing the sexual experience is part of what the eye does, the same kind of thinking self that makes all kinds of other decisions in life, I think is very useful in this. So you can keep in mind what you just said. Yeah.
I totally agree with you, Eve. And the way I describe that, the words I use for that are conscious versus unconscious sex. Anyone can make a baby. Making love is actually a series, a skill set of an awareness and understanding of certain principles. I wrote a book that's probably my second most popular book. It's called Sexual Soulmates, the 6 Essentials for Connected Sex. And in it, one of those 6 essentials for connected sex is presence, actually being present. Because what you were talking about when you were describing that conscious versus unconscious sex is friction. It's, we're not talking. I mean, not talking ruins sex. Talking, whether it's sensual and sexual mastery, is understanding these things we've been talking about. How to get a woman so engorged and turned on that she comes like crazy for you, so she wants more sex with you, instead of just spitting on your hands and plunging in and getting off in her pussy and leaving her high and dry with one stupid little clit orgasm that's like a sneeze, like boring. She doesn't want to have sex with a guy who's boring the shit out of her. That's the problem. So once a guy understands that he has to do these 4 things, and that they're not work, they're actually really fun, and they re-inject excitement back into the relationship, what is the romance? That there's different types of romance, and different types of romance, some will get you laid and some won't. There's romance that is, there's romance that moves her emotionally. And when you move a woman's emotions, you move her body, you move her toward you. You create connection with her that reminds her why she fell in love with you in the first place and why she wanted you then, so she'll want you again. Where other things like creating, like framing a photo of the two of you, they remind her why she loved you, but they don't actually make her want to have sex with you. Making her a playlist of the music that turns her on the most and giving it to her with a full body massage. That's a romantic thing that you can do that actually moves you toward sex. So the 5 pillars of passion were essentially a look into what you can do to recreate a fully romantic reconnection with your partner, some of which you do because she needs it, and some of which you do because it reminds her body that she actually is a sexual creature.
Yeah. That's nice. I feel that again, in my work through this podcast, especially, I found that a lot more people are normative and have those issues than I thought. When I used to work before, I would go to communities that were already like sexually potent communities and write about them, investigate, film them, document them. And it was kind of like, my idea of like the Masters and Johnson of the 21st century. But now, because I've had so many more people who are listeners coming on and asking questions, I find that actually those things, at the most basic domestic level are the things that make a difference. Why does she want me? Why doesn't she want me? Why is he functioning this way? Why is he malfunctioning? Is it normal? And these days there is the easy kind of like way out. I feel that like with ghosting and, dating apps, it's super easy to say, okay, I can try someone else. Right. And instead we get into kind of like these repeat patterns, but they feel less limiting because we get to change partners so much faster and, and more easily. So we're always kind of like staying on the surface of things instead of getting deeper, either emotionally or sexually. People, I feel like a lot of people stay now with the high of the start, of the beginning, when it's like the conquering and the flirting and the like self-advertising and the fantasy of each other. And, as soon as that gets into like everyday reality with all of its limitations, they start thinking that, oh, I made a mistake. She wasn't for me. She doesn't understand me, or he doesn't understand me. I can go back and like swipe again. So, yeah, I feel that I wish as well as feel that, this type of sexual education should be readily available. And I think that that's one of our greatest challenges, that like what you're saying should be accessible to everyone. It should be like Oprah level accessibility. We should have millions of people who are listening and are kind of like taking it in. I think it should be in, at the elementary school level, the high school level, middle school level, and then, of course, like in our daily media programming along with everything. But it seems that instead we get like, cute little articles maybe about how to get, this guy interested, or that don't go in depth, that don't include the anatomy you just explained to us, that don't, include like the specifics. So, the people who are interested and who have the time and who have the financial ability will look and find you. And, that's personallifemedia.com. Susan Bratton, and you have an endless supply of both, I feel, biohacking options like supplements, shots, and kind of like quick little aids to the body, so that the flow on the physical level happens, right? But also a wealth of information and advice about, practicing it. But it does take time, and I wish that it were stigma-free and just readily available. So we would, hear about it the same way that we hear about, whatever, clothing brands. Like someone should be the Yeezy of sex ed. That's where we need to get quickly, because without overcoming that stigma of the patriarchy, and that's why we, kind of like resent and demonize the patriarchy. Without overcoming that stigma, we can't like help people live the best life they can live. And what else is life for? I mean, just like work and give and raise kids, what do you get for yourself? This is one of the main pleasures that we all get to experience, poor and rich and, all races, like across the board. It's one of the few species-wide, kind of like bliss portals.
So when I was talking about orgasm, and I was talking about how if you picture in your mind a mountain, you go up one side of the mountain and then you kind of fall off the cliff. It's like your orgasm is half dome. You walk up the backside, you fall off a cliff. And then you think about a stair step where each step is going up and each step is a little longer than the last. And when you think about almost an escalator of pleasure, that's what expanded orgasm is. Expanded orgasm is a clitoral stroking technique. It's been called many things: expanded orgasm, orgasmic meditation, deliberate orgasm or DO, doing. It's been called extended massive orgasm, EMO. It's been called many different things. There are many different flavors, different lineages of this particular clitoral stroking technique. And this clitoral stroking technique helps women get into the moment of orgasm, the moment of climax, and then to be able to take that moment of climax and really pull the moment of climax like taffy to make it longer and longer. So instead of going up that hill and then falling off a cliff, what you do is you go up that hill, and then the hill grows longer and longer, and you're just staying in orgasm. And then you take a little break, and then you climb another hill, and that's a really long, flat plateau at the top of that hill. It's like a series of mesas that you begin to achieve rather than a peak and a fall. And the way that you do that is through a very conscious, deliberate, slow, light stroke on the clit with one finger underneath the hood. Usually for most women, if the clit is 12 o'clock, then it's off her left side at 2 o'clock. That's where the majority of the nerve endings end for many women, about 80 to 90% of women. And when you give the clit nerve endings, that light, delicate stroke on the meat of the clitoral head, very light, you don't wear it out, you actually allow it to sink into an orgasmic space that expands with pleasure and flows through your whole body. This expanded orgasm practice is something that when a couple has this practice, and as I've said, Tim, whom I've almost been married to for going on 30 years now, this is really the practice that saved our marriage, because I was one of those women that didn't want to have sex with my husband anymore. I was one of those women who couldn't come from penetration, who didn't know how to squirt, who could maybe squeeze out one clitoral orgasm from my vibrator. And I didn't want to have sex with him after a decade of having sex with him and not really being satisfied myself. And I just lost my interest in sex. And so we went on a journey to figure out what we could do to get our sex life back. And learning this expanded orgasm practice was really one of the Rosetta Stones for us in finally receiving selfless orgasmic pleasure, where I realized my husband loves to give it to me. He doesn't expect to get sex afterward. He is always just available for me when I'm ready. And now, because the pressure's off, I'm ready all the time when I feel well. You know, health is, if you don't feel well, you don't feel like having sex, but it'll come back. I trust my body now, but it got rid of my performance anxiety. It taught me how to have orgasms from intercourse. Plus, all the G-spot work he did on me really, really healed a lot of the sexual trauma that I've had, which in actual fact, the large majority of people, both masculine and feminine, everyone across the gender spectrum has had sexual trauma, whether it's religious oppression, you know, going back to what you were talking about earlier, Eve, with, you know, feeling that sex is a sin, or never having a good lover, or being embarrassed about our bodies or our genitals, or feeling shame for our desire, or being traumatized by another person, whether that's usually someone in your family with incest, or a date, or, you know, whatever it might be. We've talked about all of these things on the show. We've covered a wide ground. You know, whenever you talk about sex, you have to talk about the whole person and all of their collective experiences.
Yeah, and I really feel that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do feel that, you know, the earliest understanding of sex that we all have because of our lack of education is akin to rape, you know, because we were too young and uneducated to understand consent or speaking about it, you know, when you're a teenager, or even younger sometimes. So, you know, for many women and oftentimes, you know, boys, it's just a violation. What we would, you know, what we would qualify as a form of rape, as a, you know, lack of consent. Because if there is no educated consent and it's coerced, then your body doesn't know what it's in for, and then it becomes, you know, that the rape level violation. So getting from that original experience, right, to healing, to self-healing, and to finding the pleasure in it, and then kind of like the wealth of different, you know, experiences of what your body can give you when you accept it. That's a long journey, and it takes time and you know, a little bit of effort, you know, looking for the solutions, looking to figure it out, and not assume that we're all like born knowing everything. I mean, I feel like, you know, we take lessons for so long just to drive a damn car or whatever. You know, how long have we been in school to learn, like, to do basic math or to learn the geography of the planet, which most of us don't even remember anymore, you know, or to memorize some text, or, you know, learn languages, learn a new language. But we don't take that time to learn the language of sex and the, you know, how the functionality of our anatomy, which seems much more, you know, fundamental to every human being. So I think that's the value of your work, and that's the value of our, you know, our putting this programming out there for everyone around the world who can access it, because it's fundamental education to me, you know, and that's very different from, you know, porn. I think it's like, you know, education 101. You know, you really cannot live a happy life without learning about it.
And you can search on our website at personallifemedia.com, and just go up on the top right, type in any keywords, and you'll find answers. It's the Rosetta Stone of hot sex, that thing.
It is. It is. You have
it's a body of work.
Yeah. You have an amazing resource. You've organized it beautifully. You've sustained it through the years, to your credit. It's hard to stay true to this and just grow it and enjoy and update it. I saw that you even speak on, boundaries, expressing your limits, all of that, which is so important nowadays for the younger generation. Yeah. So thank you. You've done an amazingly amount of work in this field. And you have to come back.
I am happy to come back. What else do you want to talk about? What else is interesting to you right now? What are you really into right now, Eve?
Well, I'm into, what I brought up before. I'm very interested in it because I hadn't thought about it before, which is the state of flow, accessing the state of flow that we get in from orgasm as a way of healing, because I feel that we are all in a state of kind of mass disease, right?
Yeah.
So it's, even though, listeners have specific questions, what are the best ways to initiate phone sex? What are the best ways to initiate, video sex? Should I dare? Do I trust this other person on the other end to not use the material in some unethical way in the future? Dating during coronavirus. So I know that these are huge questions, but at the heart of it is we gotta heal, and the whole planet seems to be in a state, of diseased functionality, which is a state of discomfort with our body and our environment, and whatever toxicity there is out there. So I do feel that if we associate that place of flow that we get through orgasm to the place of where we need to be in order to heal, right, globally, that's a beautiful kind of closing statement, and that's a beautiful work to do when you go inward, which is what I think we should be doing more in this time. It's just kind of revisit our choices, revisit our choices also of partners. I think that COVID has made monogamy, or at least kind of living, I don't believe in government sanctioned marriage, but, living with a mate, highly desirable again, right? So it seemed that the tech revolution has made it less interesting because, you could be single and you could be seeing all kinds of people non-stop, and why sacrifice your freedom in your space. But this is one of the lessons for me and for many of the people I hear from COVID is make the compromise, commit to one person, and, find someone who's willing to kind of learn with you and grow with you, expand with you, sexually, so you can stay together. Because, hey, you could wake up into a pandemic and then you're alone trying to learn how to have phone sex with strangers, or depending on vibrators and, smart toys. And so that's a big thing that's in my mind. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the phone call, I also think that we've all seen the value of going back to nature. You live in nature, and, that's just such a, I think it's beautiful in so many ways. Your oxygen is, intake is better, right? Your access to locally grown food is better. Your access to social mobility in a time of isolation is better, right? You just have more space. So all of this, is definitely on everyone's mind, kind of making this, our conversation is untimely. And I feel at any time in the future where it will stay permanently out there in the internet, people will profit from it when they access it. And, it's good to kind of place it in this moment, this extraordinary moment in our history where we just did a massive reset, right?
Yeah, I like to call it the great pause. And normally, when we're in pause, it's the middle of winter, it's the dark time. But right now, we're in the middle of pause in the springtime. And it really, I think, encourages us not just to rest and relax, but to, like you said, reconsider what we want our life to be like going forward. And having the connection that we all, that is the birthright of our humanity, to be connected to each other in bliss,
Yes.
is such an important reset. Stopping the consumptive culture and restarting as a connective culture. That's the conversation that we're having here today. And I really appreciate you giving me access to your platform of fans and followers, because we've been talking for probably 6 months to a year, somewhere in there, you and I having,
Yes,
connection and conversation over Instagram. And, I've been a real fan of the heart and the global perspective that you bring to conscious sexuality and connection as a cure for so much of what we crave that we're missing. So thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. Yes. It was an amazing conversation full of specific, useful intel, but also just wisdom, lots of wisdom. So thank you for joining us, Susan Bratton.
Thank you, Eve.
And I hope we do it again. And thank you, everybody out there, for listening. Thank you for staying with us and for speaking sex. And until next week, speak sex and believe Eve. If I could make love incessantly, I would be God.